about 3 great women in your lifetime. They come along like they're great fighters, once every 10 years. Rocky Marciano, Sugar Ray Robertson, Joe Louis. Sometimes you get them all at once. Me, I had my 3 when I was 16. That happens. What do you mean?
Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I just want to share with you what to expect on the PTCB exam and how to pass it your first time. And I'll go over that in this video. And this paper here, it just feels so special. And I'm going to look at it, I don't know, maybe for the rest of my life possibly, but here it is, the preliminary pass results. So then that's amazing, and I found out at the very end of the test. I'm filming this now, and I took the test this morning, and how I got to this point was, you can do it one or two ways. You could do a pharmacy technician program, like an online school, like what I did through Penn Foster, or depends what state you live in, you can also work in a pharmacy and then you can go through your employer, but kind of depends on where you're at. But in my state, Pennsylvania, they changed the rules for working last year, 2025 and before. You can get in to the pharmacy with no experience. In 2026, you're required to have a state license to work in the pharmacy. So then I felt like I had to go to school because I had no prior healthcare experience at all. So I went to Penn Foster, went through their program, the Pharmacy Technician Professional, that includes an externship, and then they help prepare you for the test, the PTCB. So then that's what helped me get into the pharmacy, because the externship I did at a local CVS, and they hired me on after that at the beginning of the year. And then I was able to get my state license because I had an actual, a license requirement. I had an educational program, but also to get that license for the state, I think it might be, you have to check the website, maybe in the pharmacy, I think a year, or to get the national certification. If you don't have school, I think you're required to work 500 hours, and that's about 3 months of full-time work. So once you do one of those two paths, you go on PTCB's official website, set up an account, and put in your information, and then you fill out the test application on the exam, and it takes about a day or two for approval from them, and then you have up to 90 days to set up an actual test date. So what I did was, since I'm new to the industry, don't have a whole lot of hands-on experience with it, haven't been in pharmacy too long, then I thought just to work full-time and then at home study. So I decided to wait 90 days and schedule my exam for the very end of that. That way I don't have the hassle of rescheduling and taking a lot longer there. So what I did was I put the test for early June when I applied and got accepted for the test in March. And then I had a lot of different study resources, some paid and unpaid resources. I watched a lot of different videos on YouTube. One of the famous channels that I heard other people watched was Amanda, an official pharmacist. She has a channel that explains a lot about medications, pharmacy laws, patient safety, pharmacy math. And there's also another site called PTCB Prep Guide. So there's YouTube channels on that. Plus there's actual PTCB prep guides from that website that you can buy. So I bought a couple of packages on my own. That really helped. And then I also downloaded an actual PTCB app, and for that subscription, it's about $40 for 6 months with all kinds of different questions. There's over 800 practice questions, and the PTCB prep that I looked for, I think for the professional, you have 1 year access. It's about $80, and you get access to a couple thousand questions, and you get all the different categories for what can be on the test, and a lot of different quizzes, practice quizzes, even timed exams. In order to feel more confident and comfortable on the exam itself, I recommend taking multiple practice tests because since their time, you have just under 2 hours to take the 90 question exam. Then I recommend doing practice time test. That way you don't feel pressured because of the time on the screen. So that's what really helped me out too. And a lot of the questions that they're going to ask on the test, I'll let you know, they break it down into 4 categories: medications, pharmacy law, patient safety, and pharmacy math. And I highly recommend especially touching up on pharmacy math because they weigh the most on the test, plus medications, name and generic names, therapeutic duplications, side effects, adverse reactions, and also some questions they love to test you on the technician on in certain situations, referring them to the pharmacist, and technicians cannot counsel or give clinical advice, so that's very important. Plus, you have to really know with medications, expired medications, for example, quarantine them right away. You cannot sell them, you have to quarantine. And also, if there's something that comes up about those different meds that are no good anymore, they have to get sent to a reverse distributor. So that's something to know. Plus, pharmacy law, especially with controlled substances, you have to know the different classes, what kind of medications are under different class. There are 5 classes, and to know which ones can be transferred, how many times it can be transferred between pharmacies, for example, and especially with how many refills the different classes can have. So that's just some example questions, and then the different math questions that you might encounter are percent ratios. I got some of those questions, and then some other common questions I got was dosages, and you have to do conversions like pounds to kilos and be able to multiply how many milligrams per dose. Plus, you have to be able to convert between micrograms, milligrams, grams, so you have to know how to do that. So those are the math problems I personally got, and if you don't touch up on those, it's going to be tough. And then the test is a total of 90 questions, and 10 are unscored, which are randomly selected that aren't going to count towards your total score. So they technically only grade 80 questions, but you don't know exactly which questions are going to be. And my strategy was for the test was I ended up clicking on the ones that I knew right away that I could just answer, that I was confident on, and then something like some more complex math problems, I came back after I did the other questions, and then some of the questions I was unsure about, I flagged them because you had the ability to do that, and you can always go back to them because some of the questions on the test can give you a hint on another question that you weren't sure about. And since it's a timed test, it's best to do all the ones you know first, and then go back to the ones that you don't know and solve the math problems. When I got all the way to the end, I think I flagged maybe about 15 or 20 questions in total, and I still had an hour and 15 minutes to go. So I knew I had a lot of time to go back and do the questions, and once I knew, I just went back on every single question and double checked myself. I went through a couple different times because I knew I had a lot of time and it was a graded test, and it's an expensive test. So I just wanted to make sure I was really happy and confident for all the questions that I answered in the test. And I noticed going back and solving the math later, it made the problem seem easier because you knew you didn't feel as rushed. And then some of the medication ones I was unsure of, I tried process of elimination and how to go with my best guess. And then that was the whole test. But they're very strict about checking in and checking out when you first get to the testing center. I went to my local community college, which is about a 20-minute drive, parked, and then they give you a 2-hour parking limit. So that's what I had to do, get an actual parking pass. That way my car doesn't get towed or I don't get fined. and then went into the testing center, signed my name. They have to take a picture of you, and then if you have a cell phone, you have to power it completely off. And you can't even wear a smartwatch. You can't have keys on you or anything. So everything has to be locked in a secure locker. And then what they do is, once you sign your name and date it and write the time down, they send you into a testing room, and there's multiple people in there taking different tests. You have the ability to use earplugs from the testing center, but I didn't need them. And then they have little privacy walls up next to the computer, and they give you a desktop. And the only thing that they give you is an online calculator where you have to click on the computer for your calculation. So it's like an embedded calculator, no handheld or anything. And they just give you a basic marker board with an eraser and a marker for math problems. I didn't need that, so I was very lucky. And then before the test, they give you a 5-minute tutorial on how to access the calculator and comments if you have to write anything down. I didn't need the comments, the calculator I just used for the math problems. And then at the very end of the test, there's a survey with 10 questions, and I was so scared about passing or failing. These questions were nerve-wracking, so I didn't really give the best scores for surveys because I was so nervous, because I usually give 9s or 10s. I was giving a lot of 8s because I was scared to death, because they asked, would you recommend this test to other people? And being really nervous, it's the tough time to answer. And at the very, very end, it said pass on the screen, and I sat there and admired it. Very, very happy and ecstatic. And then I got up, signed out, and they printed the passing paper, and I immediately started calling family and friends. It's the best feeling ever. So I recommend study a lot for it, because it's not an easy test. Put the time into it, and you should be in good shape. Hope you enjoy the video.
This more that get to know me, kiss me slowly, hard and focus.